Hey, good afternoon or evening, everyone, from wherever you're watching this. And today I'm joined with Zoltan Lehoczky, who is a very interesting individual. It's going to be a little bit different podcast episode today than you would expect, right? So Zoltan, he is the co-founder and managing director of Lombiq Technologies, originator of the Hastlayer project, which is very interesting, and we're going to dive into that. His main expertise is in net software development and software architecture design. Active in open source, core contributor of the ASP.NET Core CMS Orchard Core, guest lecturer at Óbuda University, John von Neumann Faculty of Informatics. So quite a diverse background again that's our guest here has today. So happy to have you on once again, Zoltan. And how's the mood for today's conversation?
Thank you, Rach. Well, I'm glad to be here, Nicholas. So I think indeed we bring quite a different background to the space industry, and so I hope we can show something interesting to your audience.
Perfect, absolutely. So again, more about the the project that we're going to discuss, Hastlayer, right? So I know that the project has received funding from the European Union, Horizon 2020 research and innovation program, and you have a grant, so congrats on that once again. But if we take it just a bit back, right, just a bit back, what inspired you to create Hastlayer, and how did you come up with the idea of turning computationally heavy programs into computer chips? That's my question to you.
Yeah, and actually, where it begins is as a personal story. It had nothing to do with space tech. It started at my university time, at that Óbuda University that you also mentioned, actually. We learn about hardware design, logic hardware design. So, how to create a chip, because I studied to become a computer engineer. And not just software development and computations in general, but also hardware design as part of that curriculum. And then we used so-called FPGAs for that, which are chips that can be reconfigured. So pretty much, you can make a processor out of it in a way you like. Of course, there are limitations, but you can rewire it on the fly. It's very cool tech, but it's very hard to use because it's hardware design. It's super low level. You have to think in terms of gates and wires and clock cycles. And I thought that, okay, this should be better. And I was already a software developer by then, a software developer of a .NET platform that you already mentioned. And I thought that, okay, this should be possible to do from .NET. And that's where Hastlayer is coming from, which is basically that. We utilize FPGAs to accelerate our computations for the .NET platform.
Wonderful, yes. So again, that's a great a backstory of how you came up with that and how you decided to really create that. Now, if we're talking about the application of Hastlayer for the space industry, right? So again, how could you explain again the process of how you can, first of all, integrate Hastlayer? Let's say if we're talking with the satellite manufacturers, SDK, for example, and how the software payload could interface with the Earth observation camera or similar sensor or any other application, pretty much.
Just before going any further, we are not an established space tech company. We are more like aspiring to become a full-fledged space tech company. So we are bringing Hastlayer into the space industry, but it's not like we would be authoritative when it comes to space. Now, that being out of the door, the Hastlayer is basically a tool that a software developer can add to their software. And it started on the ground, in the cloud, for example. So in the cloud, there are always also computations. You create your .NET application. We are talking about the .NET platform again here. You can add Hastlayer to it and tell Hastlayer to accelerate some computationally intensive part of your software. And this is the same thing that happens on board of a satellite as well. We are talking about new space nanosatellites, just to be clear. Now to use components for onboard processing that are quite similar to off-the-shelf devices that you can use every day. Specifically, the onboard computer of many nanosatellites is quite similar to the platform that you have in your smartphone. It uses an ARM CPU, and some of these also contain an FPGA. Actually, a lot of onboard computers that you can just purchase contain that. So we have the hardware that Hastlayer can utilize. So what happens then is that there's a little Linux running on board of that computer. Again, that's already there. It's not we came up with it. And .NET runs on that Linux. So as a .NET developer, you can pretty much write an app for such a satellite onboard computer or payload computer. You can interface with the Earth observation camera or the radio or any sensors or anything available otherwise from .NET as well. .NET can interface with anything from software. So if previously it was available as a sensor that you can use from a software, it will also be available from .NET. But some of the processing will happen on the FPGA, like processing Earth observation images. SAR images are typically things that the various processing that you do on board is computationally intensive. And these are things that can be made a lot faster. They also consume less power with Hastlayer.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, that has quite a wide range of applications, again, as you explaining, right? So my next question for you, Zoltan, will be, how will you go about measuring the performance, right? And gains and, performance gains and power consumption reductions that Hastlayer will allow operators to achieve?
And that's a very important question, because in the end, well, this is what matters, right? We have, by the way, Hastlayer is fully open source. So free and open source, you can use it right away. You can see in depth how it works. You can inspect it in detail. And one of the things we have published together with the source as well are benchmarks. We have what's also open source are a lot of examples, which might not be very similar to what your actual workload might be, because, well, that depends on what you want to do. But we have a couple of examples, and we measure those. Pretty much how you approach something like this is as you would usually approach a performance measurement with any software. First of all, you are interested in the time, and secondly, you are interested in the power consumption. Now, both of these can be measured in some cases with onboard devices or onboard tools. The time, of course, is quite simple to do, or externally. We actually, for our benchmarks, we did both. We used the development board, not an actual satellite yet. We used the development board. We measure the time with an onboard timer. We measure the power consumption with some FPGA tool, as well with an external, let's call it meter. And both of these are promising.
Okay. That's again, that's quite clear. That's quite clear. So if we talk about, let's say, because Hastlayer, as I understand, it's not specifically designed for space industry only, right? So it has applications in adjacent industries also. So what would be some of those use cases, for example, if we're talking about other industries besides the space industry? Yeah.
And by the way, one note here, when we are talking about the space industry, we are not just talking about the space segment. Of course, that's the most exciting, but ground segment is interesting as well. When it comes to image processing, very similar, computationally speaking, very similar problems are on the ground as well, when it comes to data ingestion. That also includes the space industry. Otherwise, also image processing, even in web applications, it's interesting. When you use any social media site, for example, and you upload an image or you upload a video, then a lot of processing power goes into converting those images, resizing them, sometimes adding watermarks, etc. Now that's also something that Hastlayer can accelerate. Financial computations, high frequency trading on the stock market. So these are things that investment banks, automated trading companies can utilize. Scientific computations, not just space tech, but otherwise in natural sciences or engineering simulations are also things that can benefit from these. And AI, large language models, are of course quite a fashionable topic nowadays. Now, FPGAs, not Hastlayer, but FPGAs generally are utilized there as well. Next, we intend to look into whether using Hastlayer can be of any benefit.
Okay. So now if we take it a bit back again, right? So as we discussed some of the applications and, you know, what are the uses and how do we measure its performance? It's quite hard again to develop this, right? This software, this technology. So it's very hard to develop that. So what were some of the challenges and roadblocks along the way that, again, you're facing still to this day, you know, that you're trying to overcome, and how do you actually go about developing a, you know, system like this?
So what Hastlayer does, we could also think of it in such terms, is that it allows a software developer to do a hardware developer's job. Okay. In a very, very limited way, but still this is what happens, because a software developer writes their software as usual, and Hastlayer converts that into what otherwise a hardware engineer would write. And now, why not every software engineer is a hardware engineer and vice versa is because these are very different areas. Developing a piece of hardware is very different than writing a piece of software. And these conceptual and fundamental differences make developing Hastlayer itself harder as well. Pretty much in every feature of a software that we want to support with Hastlayer has to be specifically handled. And we need to think about it. Hey, you do this in the software. What's the hardware level equivalent of it? What makes sense? How can we kind of translate it into the hardware? And because yeah, it's very different. And I'm a software developer, but I also had to understand hardware development to an extent for this. We have people on the team who are hardware developers or hardware engineers who had to understand the software side a bit more. And also during these interactions, we noticed that yeah, we speak quite different languages.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, and again, the life cycle also going to be just much different, much, you know, smaller as well, like shorter, right? To develop again this completely this you know, hardware when we're talking about that, right? So this means that you minimize the room for error as well, right? So for example, if we talk in a simple terms, right? So a software developer develops again a software side, and then the Hastlayer will give some sort of a initial type of, you know, suggestion for the hardware, right? So how it's going to operate, and then hardware developers, they're going to pick that up, they're going to review that, they're going to modify it, and then they have you know, already the ready design, right? Which versus them having to come up from scratch, right, with the design.
That's certainly one approach. What we suggest, so that would be the approach if you want to squeeze out every little bit of performance. Okay. Now, the approach that we optimize for is instead, let's call it agile development. Okay. So that you continuously improve your software. When it comes to a satellite, you reconfigure that satellite in orbit, which of course is nowadays something that that's widely available. Well, probably not widely, but certainly available. And for that, you want to be able to quickly make changes to the application, conversely, quickly deploy changes to the hardware part, get that hardware acceleration quickly in place as well, and quickly deploy it even on board of a satellite. Now, of course, after suitable checks, but without much of an inspection of the hardware implementation. Of course, this has drawbacks as well. So there can be issues, there can be mistakes. Even Hastlayer itself can have bugs. Well, it certainly has bugs, but it can even introduce bugs. But all in all, in this approach, I think it's worth it if the agile approach is otherwise suitable for you or otherwise beneficial for you. It's beneficial for your use case to be able to quickly adapt your onboard software.
Okay, perfect. So now as we're talking about just the business side of things a bit more, because on Altair Insights, we often discuss again the technology side, and we discuss the business side of the space industry as well, right? So how big is your team, Zoltan, currently, as we're talking?
We have the Hastlayer is our project, and our product, but the company behind is called Lombiq Technologies, and at Lombiq we do a lot of other things as well, mostly focusing actually on .NET web development.
Okay.
So who works on Hastlayer changes, but altogether the people in Lombiq are 22, 23 nowadays, I think, when we are talking about the core team, and we also work with a lot of external team members too, also on Hastlayer.
Okay, so that's great. And then, as I understand, right? So, did you, when you were developing Hastlayer, so did you pour the capital from the other side of your business into this project, or did you actually go and raise for developing again the capital for development of this?
We financed it itself. There was one grant that you also mentioned, the Horizon 2020 grant. That actually came in quite in the middle. We started Hastlayer and brought it to quite an advanced stage just by investing into it ourselves. Speaking about business and tech, we with my business partner are rather tech people. Although as entrepreneurs, you have to understand the business, of course. And we wanted to do Hastlayer because we were interested. It was a research and development project, and the business side of it is kind of an afterthought. We first wanted to see whether we can make it, whether it makes sense, and then, well, perhaps people also want to pay for something related to it.
So have you had this initial interest registration, or generally how it works in the space industry with contracts, everything the way they approach it, they're a letter of intent, that's what they do. They sign those, and have you had a discussion with any of the current, let's say, manufacturing players, that are looking to explore again the Hastlayer for their projects?
Yes, and coming from the software industry, the space industry, even the very startup-like new space part of it is very different.
So what would be the main differences? So Zoltan, as you brought it up, so
yeah, perhaps the main thing is the speed of business. Let's talk about it.
Space industry very slow, right? So we'll bring that.
Yes. Yeah, when
that's one of the downsides, actually, that the space industry, that's one of the ugly things that's happening. So
it seems so, yes. So yeah, what we have seen, for example, is that it takes like half a year to get from the initial contract. Right? Sorry?
Half a year to make a decision for a company, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very sad again that we're seeing things like that. In this industry where we're supposed to move fast, right? So
yes, so these are not orbital speeds, but nevertheless, it's a very, very exciting industry. Of course, that's why we try to get into it, and we can be patient. And yes, we have been in talks for quite a long time with a lot of corresponding companies. What we want to do next is, and that's also, I have to admit, kind of a personal aspiration. What we want to do next is an in-orbit demonstration. So that's what we are currently focusing on with our existing contacts in the new space industry.
Yep, that would be amazing. Again, they do love that, you know, in the space industry. If you have a demonstration mission successful, you know, they believe that's it. You know, after that, it's a green line. Until then, you're like an alien, you know, especially if you're coming from a different industry. Speaking from personal experience, it pretty much works like that sometimes. So, which is again not the best, right? So, uh, are there any other things that you notice that are different, let's say, when you were comparing these two industries, right? So besides the speed, I mean, I'm pretty sure some of the approaches that work in the software side, you know, software industry would not be, let's say, applicable here, right? In the case, and would be either turned down or, you know, just not working at all, right? When talking about business.
Well, you know, people are skeptical most of the time, even though we had some very, very enthusiastic feedback as well. But some people are skeptical because it's something new, and that's completely acceptable, of course. Perhaps people are a little bit less open in that aspect, which again is understandable. You are not running an app on a web server or on your phone, but you're putting something on board of a spacecraft, so there must be differences. Another thing I noticed is that apart from the slowness, business is perhaps not that fluid or not that straightforward to do. Even if you approach a company that, hey, you have this thing, I want to buy it. How much does it cost? And then if you get a cost, and
you're not gonna get a cost.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
That was also very interesting to see. It's like. Okay.
Yeah, everything seems to be happening like behind the curtains, right? So in this like a secret way, and you know, I also heard that for the first time here that you can actually purchase a service or a, you know, product which you don't know how much it's going to cost you even when you put a signature on the paper, right? Which is very interesting, very interesting. So
yes, definitely. So that was also strange. Also, one more thing is open source. In the software industry, open source is nothing that you have to explain. Everybody uses open source. Well, not everybody contributes to open source, but a lot of companies, a lot of people do, and not just out of personal interest or just to have fun, but because they see that if they give back to the community, it will have a rippling effect, and everybody will be better off. Now, we are a very open source focused company. We have like more than 100 open source projects up on GitHub, for example, Hastlayer being one of them, as mentioned. And that was also something that it seems was at least curious, even if not completely strange to space industry players. Like open source. Why is it open source? What's open source to begin with? So, but I think since we can think of satellites, I'm still talking about new space nanosatellites, just to be clear. When we think of them, in the end, they are edge computing devices, partially. So we are still talking about computing devices and still talking about software. So the normal software development approaches should still apply there. And I think eventually they will.
Yeah, another thing that's very different in the space industry, I don't know if you have noticed it over this again period that you ventured, you know, also with this project into the space industry side. The way the marketing is done here is very different. I mean, it's almost not being done at all in the space industry if you compare it to the software side, right? There's a lot of more marketing approach and, you know, positioning and everything. So here, everything is just, you know, hey, I met you at the event, let's shake hands, let's go behind the curtain, let's discuss, you know. So here that kind of old conservative approach has been used pretty much, right? Which is you know, a big opportunity for somebody like you who's coming in from another more, again, fluid, more dynamic industry with more of the creative ideas and really can exploit again those. So yep,
I hope so. You know, again, I think I understand the reason for this, especially if we are talking about manned space flight. Well, that's something completely different, but we are not talking about anything related to that. Just to be clear, and everything is 1, 2, 3 orders of magnitude more expensive. because, well, you have to get the damn thing up into orbit. So it's understandable that even the most agile companies in the space industry are still quite traditional compared to an ordinary software company. But still, I think we and other software companies can bring something to the table when it comes to, well, developing software for space.
Mm-hmm. So Zoltan, would you have an advice for somebody again that wants to transition in the space industry with their company or project, or they want to start a company in the space industry? My question to you, I know what our audience is doing because they're listening to our podcast and then they're attending the International Space Convention, which is also the event that we organize, the biggest virtual space industry event. So they do that and they hear from those leading experts and they get themselves updated. But how else would you approach starting and staying up to date to the industry news?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm probably not the best person for that because I'm quite sporadic on that. Mm-hmm. I'm subscribed to a couple of channels, couple of newsletters when it comes to space, but I'm not that much keeping a finger on the pulse of the industry day to day, rather in broader strokes. How somebody would enter the industry, I'm not too sure about either, but I think what works well for us is going to large space events.
Okay.
That was even before COVID when we started, so we are talking about in-person events. And perhaps this relates to the more traditional or conservative approach of the space industry in general. Connections there were quite easy, I would say, to make. Some of them also we could maintain. It seems to me that just going to companies, with cold emails or something like that, that's really hard in this industry.
Yeah, you will not really get into, because in other industries, you just knock on the doors, you like stop by at the office, you book an appointment or, anything like that. And here it's non-existent pretty much. I mean, you can still reach out virtually and, we again offer also those solutions again for the attendees of our events and, individuals that can, reach out and book with each other the networking situation. So we facilitate that and we're pushing more of a virtual side, because it could be really tough and really, capital intensive for some of the companies to again ship their equipment, get a booth, at an event and travel with a 4 or 5 people team. And because I had many countless conversations with different companies starting anywhere from under 50 people to all the way to 500 plus employees that they have, right? So and what they're saying is that they invest a lot into like traveling in those events, but the return on investment is pretty much non-existent. So they either break even or they just lose money, and we're talking about amounts of and up to €1 million plus, right, or dollars, right, whatever we want to discuss. So which is again very interesting, and that's where again that's why we spread the knowledge this way, and we offer insights from individuals like yourself to our audience, and I know that they appreciate that because we're receiving a lot of feedback from them as well. So that's amazing. So for the next question, in that case, Zoltan, right? So my next question would be to you. Let's see. So where I want to take this conversation, because it's a technical subject and more of a. Let me ask you this, are there any more technical aspects of the Hastlayer that you want to highlight, or what is the plan for you that you would like to develop with the Hastlayer in the next years? I mean, what's next for you?
Currently, Hastlayer is not space tech specific. Okay. There aren't really space tech specific parts of it, and that's a natural starting point. But in the next years, when we get some more traction in the space industry, hopefully, after we also have an IoT behind us, then we want to add more features to it that are actually space industry specific. Talking in more software industry terms, we want to improve the API or provide APIs for various sensors. Now, those are not standardized, or usually they aren't, but at least we want to make it easier for a software developer to really like write an app for a satellite, write in a way that interfacing with an Earth observation camera shouldn't be harder than interfacing with a webcam in a desktop .NET application. Now, again, of course, there are a lot of differences in the device, the application itself, the whole industry, but that's kind of the vision, to be able to easily write applications for satellites. And for that, a lot of feature needs to be added to Hastlayer as well.
Wonderful. And Zoltan, so I would like to also know this, as you again qualified for the grant and everything, right? So how hard it is just generally, in the grant selection process and just doing like business with the governmental structures and organizations, if we're talking from a software side or from a space industry side, so whichever you would like to let us know. And what are some of the things that those young startups who are looking to explore those contracts and grants, should keep in mind and follow some of the steps? Well, what would you recommend?
Our experience there is very limited, so perhaps the advice that I can share is very limited too. We have we didn't do space industry grants, so no ESA grants or something like that. The biggest grant that we had was the Horizon 2021, which is an EU level grant for small and mid-sized enterprises. And it was also a small one in relative terms. All in all, it was quite a simplified grant process. It was quite simple relative to grants otherwise. For us, it wasn't, because you still needed to write 15 pages and also write it in a way that it's technical enough. They actually believe that you are not just making stuff up, but it's not too technical, so people who are not actually software developers can also understand it. That was a bit of a challenge, but otherwise it was a fairly straightforward process. We did have help for that as well, for writing the grants, or rather, should I say, taking the content that we wanted to put into the grant application and shaping it into a form that's actually compatible with the grant application. Otherwise, we had small grants here and there, like some help visiting a conference, or connections, stuff like that. But those were more informal, no huge grant processes. Just fill out this form and we'll let you know.
Absolutely awesome. So now speaking more about your personal experience, right? And again, a bit more of a business side. So you're currently an active guest lecturer, right, at the university. That's Óbuda University, right? So
that's right.
How do you use that expertise when it comes to, if it's training your own team, right? Or if it's, do you yourself train your team from having this teaching and experience, or do you actually outsource the team training? Because in space industry, I'll be clear, not a lot of companies actually have employee upskilling programs, right, in place, right? So how does that look in the software world? And what do you do personally as a company?
So what's related to the university teaching parts, and that's actually something that I do with two of my colleagues, is related to our main business, the web development, not related to Hastlayer. And there, it's quite usual as is in the software industry in general, that companies go to partner with universities. They have subjects pretty much. That's what we also do. We have 2 subjects. We had them running for quite a lot of years now. Always improved, of course, and updated, but still quite a long track record there. And that's actually quite related to how we train our own team members. Mm-hmm. Because well, actually a lot of our new team members come from university in some way.
Yeah, investing in the future, right?
Yeah. Yes, and you need when it comes to training, you need much of the same skills, much of the same resources, even that you share on our university course. Is the same thing, since we are talking about the same software development topics for our prospective or new team members.
And now if we're talking about just company culture, and company team bonding activities, right? Team building or bonding, whatever we want to call it, right? So what would be some of those examples again in your case, and what does the company culture look like? I mean, do you have any set of rules that you guys follow inside the company, or how does it look like? It's best that you explore on that and highlight the sides that you would like to.
Sure. As I mentioned, we are a very open source company, and that's not just related to our activities that you can see from the outside, but also to the company culture. We tend to say that we are like an open source community with a company around it. Mm-hmm. We were born out of the open source community, so that's not by chance. And how we organize the team is a bit like an open source community. For example, there are rules, but we keep them to the minimum. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, everything is geared towards developers being able to work in an efficient way without disruptions. Mm-hmm. For example, no daily meetings. Generally, very, very few meetings. Mm-hmm. We put a stress on asynchronous communication versus like in writing, versus calling each other. Otherwise, the approach is as hands-off as possible. Mm-hmm. We foster the team and we help each other, but otherwise, you work independently in your own pace, in your own place, foremost remotely, with whatever tools you would like. Really, what matters is the quality of the end result, the quality of the software that you developed. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, everything else is up to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Perfect, wonderful. And again, as we speak, so for the last kind of question here from my side, so what does the space industry landscape generally look like in your country? And is there any specific, country policy to foster that, so that you are aware of?
Mm-hmm. So we're a company from Hungary, but actually we have quite little ties to the industry in Hungary. For example, all of our clients are from the English-speaking world. Most of our partners otherwise are from the English-speaking world.
Why am I not surprised? No offense to anyone. Yeah, go ahead.
And so we do know about the space industry players in Hungary, but there are just a couple of companies. I wouldn't consider ourselves a space industry company yet, just to be clear. Otherwise, that's perhaps also related to Hungary being an ESA member state not long ago, perhaps like 5-8 years, something like that, or even less. But I think what fosters this a lot is talking about Europe is ESA. Really, well, that's not a huge surprise, but it seems to me, again, as a newcomer, that a lot of things revolve around ESA. And ESA business incubation centers, those startup hubs that are in each ESA member states can help a lot. A lot of the initial kicks that we got to check out the space industry in more detail. We're coming from the Hungarian ESA Business Incubation Center as well.
So you went through the incubator, right, as well yourself?
Not actually, because we were not a new company by then, so we were disqualified from that. But we went to events. We went to events. We talked with the members of the incubation center. We got a lot of help. We didn't go through the incubation, but perhaps it wouldn't be timely at that stage anyway. But otherwise, we got a lot of help.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And for the next, I know we're going just a bit over, but that's fine. So I wanna dive deep into that. So, what role do you see again? Because assuming you have the board of directors, you have the board of advisors, right, inside the company. So, what role have they played, and why would you in success of your company? And why would you recommend the other, let's say, startup founders to and encourage them to also set up those boards of advisors and boards of directors?
Well, that's a tough question. I'm not sure whether there's a general advice I can give there. By the way, we don't have a formal board. We have our team where we have different roles. And that also means that we seek the advice of our team members on all important matters in various ways as well. Otherwise, we have advisors, outside advisors.
So that's like a mentors, right? So personally, or
when I mentioned we as Lombiq, the company.
Oh, okay, I see. So as a company, okay.
Yeah. Otherwise, we also have we Lombiq have outside advisors as well to talk about business questions, big questions that we think we need some feedback with. By the way, one of these very experienced people came from that EU grant application that we talked about. They can be very useful to.
Yeah, that can be sometimes more valuable than the grant itself, right?
It actually was.
Awesome.
But I wouldn't. I think as a founder of a company, I think advisors are valuable to get you going when you feel really stuck. But they won't solve issues for you.
Yeah, of course not.
That you have to keep in mind.
Nobody will build your business for you, I mean, right? So.
Oh, of course, but they won't even solve the hard questions for you, or figure out the hard solutions. But they can give a little bit of impulse from the outside to get you going again if you are stuck.
Yep. Just to get the thought process going, right? So
yes, yeah,
in the right direction. Yep. Very important, and we personally also find that it's very valuable again. So that's amazing. Okay, Zoltan. So I think that was it from my side for the questions. If you have any final notes or remarks that you would like to share, now is the time.
Well, thank you again for taking me. I really think that we'll see more agile software development being done in the space industry, and in a couple of years we can really think and talk in terms of space software development. It will be a thing like mobile application development. Let's say more or less fenced area of specialists as it is today, and something more open, something more accessible, and something that's buzzing all the time.
Wonderful. And again, I hope that's really going to be the case, and then we're going to see Lombiq as a full-fledged space company, right? Even though I recommend to keep some of the processes and some of the approaches of a software company, but being a space company at the same time is going to be awesome. So again, happy I enjoyed this conversation. So yeah, thanks again for joining us today, Zoltan. And
thank you,
for the
Nicholas.
audience, we're going to see you at the next episode.